Welcome to the Filmcast review of Society of the Snow. I'm going to read the plot summary of this movie from the internet. Quote, in 1972, a Uruguayan flight crashes in the remote heart of the Andes, forcing survivors to become each other's best hope, end quote. This movie is directed by J.A. Bayona. It was recently nominated for an Academy Award. I had heard mixed things about this movie leading up to its release, but then once it came out on Netflix, it's one of their top films, and a lot of the reviews have been really positive. So I was really eager to visit this, to check out this movie with you all. Devindra, I know you are probably one of the original J.A. Bayona heads on the podcast.
In the tank for Bayona.
In the
after
tank
the
for
orphanage.
Bayona. I mean, Devindra Harder will defend Fallen Kingdom, so
good movie.
That's where he's coming at this from. But I'm much more interested in Jeff Kanata's opinion on this movie, because Jeff Kanata, not typically a huge fan of J.A. Bayona's work. So Jeff Kanata, why don't we start with you this week? And let me ask you, what were your thoughts on Society of the Snow?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say my thoughts on Society of the Snow are best summed up in the form of a limerick.
All right, let's hear it.
When you watch the plane take a nosedive and feel what it takes to survive, it's a harrowing trip through human hardship, and the filmmaking buries alive.
Nice. You're, of course, referring to the other movie about this incident.
1993's Alive.
1993's Alive.
I remember
as the Uruguayan.
These Uruguayan.
Because when you think Uruguayan, you think Ethan Hawke.
You think Ethan. The first thing that comes to mind is Ethan Hawke. I'm glad you said it too, Jeff.
I am old enough to have been working at a movie theater when Alive came out, and I remember it vividly. That movie. I don't think I've seen it since, but there are scenes that you will remember seeing that movie. And similarly, there are scenes in Society of Snow that you shall never forget if you are brave enough to watch this movie. I will admit, I was unable to watch this movie in one sitting. I found it very upsetting and very disturbing and very dark. It is ultimately a story of the triumph of the human spirit, I guess. But really, this is an endurance test, both for the people that made it, the subjects of this movie in the true story of it, and I think the audience. I think the reason to watch this movie, I guess, is twofold. To truly understand what these humans went through in 1972 in the real Andes, you get a sense of the just extraordinary anguish that they must have had to go through. This movie conveys that in a way that Alive did not. I mean, we definitely see the 30 years of filmmaking progress we've made in how we are able to express this, to realize the actual hardship that these people went through. And I think I admire that in a way, and I suppose there is a value to it. But truly, I think the reason one would watch this, what I got out of it most of all, is admiring the filmmaking. It is an extraordinarily made movie. The seriousness and commitment to authenticity that everyone involved went through. The actors, dozens of them, did not eat for many weeks. This movie was shot in sequence, which is a rarity in filmmaking. And the actors went on these extreme diets under the supervision of nutritionists, but went under these extreme diets to transform their bodies. I mean, this is basically The Machinist times 12 in order to have all of the actors go through this physical transformation to show how, the circumstances of not having any food available to them changed them. And they shot it on location in some sequences in the Andes. They shot it in high altitudes in the snow. And they were able to present sequences that are truly disturbing, truly harrowing, truly, I found to be difficult to watch because primarily I knew this really happened. And there seems to be a commitment to conveying the truth of what these people went through and how they survived it. That said, above and beyond that, I found the movie lacking in that I have no idea who any of these people are.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie doesn't care to tell me. It's not about that. It's, I hate to use a reductive term like, uh, suffering porn or something along those lines. But it really is just putting you in the shoes of these avatars. And yes, authentically, I think much more than alive, and bravo for this, authentically in the language those people spoke, looking much more like they looked with their actual histories, using their real names. Alive didn't even use the survivors' real names. I don't believe they had the rights to do so. This movie very much about honoring the names of the individuals that lost their lives.
Right. Like anytime someone passes away in the film, they show the person's name and how old they were when they passed.
Yes. So in a lot of ways, this is about honoring the truth of this story. And I think showing the hardships, showing the anguish, showing the suffering that we went through, but that's all it is. And that's okay. But at 2 hours and 30 minutes, I think 20 plus minutes, there it really is no sense. I mean, even to the point where I know the actors by sight, I have a relationship with them, but I have no idea really any differences between them, any distinctive characteristics between these individual characters in the movie. This one says these things and that one says that thing, and this one lives and that one dies. But I don't know anything about them as human beings. And the movie just is uninterested in conveying that to me at all. It is really concentrated on the moment in time, the 72 days they spent suffering. And boy, howdy, does it illustrate that. And I think beautifully so. And I think, puts to rest any ever need to go back and revisit Alive. This is the definitive telling of that endurance test, that survival story. But beyond that, I kind of wish it had more. I'm not going to say meat on the bone. I won't say that.
Well, not much left after
I will
this movie.
say I wish it had more
substance.
Yeah. That's a good word.
Fair. Devindra Hardwar, your thoughts on this movie?
I feel like you should never see The Impossible, Jeff, which is J.A. Bayona's movie about the Thailand tsunami, the one with Naomi Watts, another harrowing story. I think he's very good at conveying these sort of sequences. I love this movie. I think this movie is fantastic, and I think it really portrays what I love about his movies, because he is a very poetic filmmaker. Because you're right, Jeff, we could get more details about these characters, or like more sense of their personalities and stuff. I do think we do get some of that. We know, like, okay, these two are the doctors and they're the ones that are going to have to do some of the worst work. We know who the captain is and what his persona is and what convinces him to do some things towards the end. But beyond that, like, everybody else is just like different groups, and we don't really get a sense. This would make a really good, I'd hate to say it, but a really good like limited TV series or something. But I also look at this movie and I'm like, how the hell did you make this? Like, how I know a lot of the backdrops from some of the Andes Mountains are from like second unit footage that they like digitally put in there, but a lot is just shot there too.
There's a great documentary on Netflix that is very worth watching. I would say do not watch it before you watch the movie if you're interested in the movie, because it spoils literally everything. But it's a phenomenal look at how far filmmaking has come
Mm-hmm.
in 30 years and what they're actually able to do and how they did it, and it's extraordinary.
You know how good the movie is if you immediately watch the making of right afterwards, which I did. Afterwards,
How?
So did I.
A lot of the backgrounds were, or a lot of the places they filmed were in the Sierra Nevada mountains, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So like
But
they
still
actually
at altitude,
they went
in the
up
cold.
into the mountains and actually filmed a bunch of it, and that's how it looks as incredible as it does.
Yeah.
Because it really looks like they actually went out and filmed it in
And
they look
these remote
cool.
places.
That's
the
real
other
cool.
thing that's extraordinary is that they used many first-time actors, first-time film actors. A lot of them only had experience in theater or had were amateurs, and the acting is incredible, and I think that speaks to the directing of these young actors and getting the performances out of them that you never for 1 second doubt that they are experiencing these hardships.
Absolutely. Anyway, Devindra, continue.
I think Bayona like is more a visual poet than like a documentarian or somebody who's trying to like get into all the nitty gritties of it. And I think what we do get here is a harrowing story that I think does really show the power of the human condition. And I do think, or of the human spirit, right? The power of like to survive, what it takes to survive. I was kind of fascinated how it even dealt with the whole thing. You hear about the story and you just think, oh, the cannibal story, right? The story where they had to eat each other, and how that was conveyed was just so like, first of all, very pragmatic, but also just like, yes, they have that discussion. They didn't agree. People did not agree to this. This feels wrong. I'm not going to do it. But you get down to it. And then I think watching how real, how like visceral this movie feels, you're like, well, if I'm there for 10 days with no sign of hope, like it's meat. I need I need to survive. Like, I don't know. I don't know if you guys even had that thought while you were watching, but I was like, yeah, no, I get it. I would totally do it too. It's not something I'd be excited to do, but if you're trying to survive, if you're especially if like your survival can help get your friends out or something too, I think that whole thing was dealt with really, really well. Um their whole situation where they're like, okay, we're going to try this thing, the various scenarios that they try to fix things, like fixing the radio, to doing the hike up the mountain the first time. I was just like really in this story. So like, if I was watching this in the theater, and I kind of wish I had the chance to, I feel like people would have like erupted once like things get going in the third act. I don't know if we'll do spoilers on this, but there's a point.
We'll do spoilers.
Yeah,
Let's save it for the spoilers.
Where you will definitely erupt and clap, and I did it by myself in my basement. So I think it is a very affecting movie. I think it's really powerful, and it's something Bayona does really well. Like, he does really get you in a story. The Impossible is such a like compelling thing to watch because of that, but also that's even more like miserable of an experience at times to watch too. So I don't know. I love this movie. I'm glad like it has that sense of verisimilitude. I feel really bad that a lot of people had to suffer through these terrible conditions to even make this movie, but I think the art was worth it. So yeah, loved it.
Jeff, I agree with about 90% of what you said about this movie, which is to say, I think the filmmaking is incredible. I am disappointed by how little we know about the people in the movie. And I agree with you. There's no need to revisit this topic after this movie.
We're done.
Like, there's no reason to go back to the original Alive. Like, a lot of what you said really resonates with me. One thing I disagree with, and that is, you said that the movie is all about, surviving with these people. I think that this movie really does try to take this position of, we are all we have, like we need to depend on each other as humans in various ways, sometimes ways we can't even anticipate. And that this movie is a reminder of that idea. It is not just, hey, we're surviving this terrible thing. It is very clearly at various points, sometimes very explicitly, some occasionally clunkily.
I believe in the God in this person.
Saying like we are all we have. There is something beautiful about humans and our ability to not only survive but help each other survive.
Yeah. It's like they're shouting, "We live in a society."
That's
snow.
right.
Of snow.
We live in the society. So and that's what I found to be very powerful about the movie is like, and it does it in a fairly elegant way overall. So it's a little bit like someone just literally at one point someone just literally says the themes of the movie.
Yeah.
But I was convinced because the way that this movie illustrates how they surmounted these challenges, I think really goes to illustrating that theme. I also think, I'm sure the movie took lots of dramatic license, and
Mhm.
that's fine with me. But I actually went and like looked up the stuff, and a lot of the stuff actually happened. Like a lot of the
Yeah.
storms and other stuff that actually I was like, wow, like they
Well,
actually stuck relatively closely to what
it's
actually occurred.
it's based on a book
Yeah.
called Society of the Snow that was evidently laboriously researched and
Mhm.
used lots of interviews with the survivors. So I can understand why. And it seems to me, just watching this movie, the priority was telling it exactly as it
Mhm.
happened, to so much as to the extent that they could. And I think that shows, right? It
Yeah.
comes through.
Yeah, I agree. So I think this movie's a masterpiece. It
Mhm.
is one of the most harrowing experiences I've ever had watching a movie. But it's also really powerful. It's just an incredible thing to contemplate. There's a reason why this story has endured for decades. It's because the idea that you could crash land in the middle of this place that's completely inhospitable to life. Honestly, the last time that a location was framed this effectively as being inhospitable to life was Gravity, when they were in space, and it's like life in space is impossible, and it's basically life in this place is also impossible.
Yeah. Some of the
I
shots, man,
Yeah.
It's
with these
insane, yeah.
wide shots of
Yeah.
just nothingness.
Yeah.
It's
The camera
beautiful.
going over as they reach a peak and just, like,
Yeah.
look over and just
Ugh.
man.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about a few spoilers for this movie, okay?
Mhm.
So spoilers for Society of the Snow starting right now. I'll just describe a few things about my experience watching this movie. First of all, I had been told that the plane crash would be really upsetting. And somehow, even
Mhm.
being prepared for that, it was more upsetting than
Pretty
I
upsetting.
was ready for. It's probably one of the most. It feels like that's actually how it would happen.
Yeah.
I've never been
Yeah.
in a plane crash, but it feels like, oh, if you were in a plane crash, that's how it would unfold. The chaos, the
Yeah.
people being impaled by just the randomness of like some people live, some people die. There's no sort of order behind it. There's no rationale.
I mean, I've brought up this topic before, and I feel like you guys don't understand how wild it is that movies can do this. But Castaway, right? The Lost pilot, like
Mm.
the
Yeah.
movies do such a great job of conveying this crazy notion because whenever I'm in a plane, I'm like, how is this working? How is any of this possible? Right? This
Mhm.
could, in an instant, this
Yeah.
could all fall apart. And I think movies have done a great job of like showing some of that. This is one of the most accurate, it seems.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
I recall. Have you guys seen Alive?
I
Yes.
have. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I
When I
saw it
was a
when it came
kid.
out a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, 93, right? Yeah, I recall vividly the crash sequence in that movie, and what stands out is the fuselage coming off in the back,
Mhm.
and the people in the front still surviving as the fuselage, separated in half, and that happens again here, and it is clearly what actually happened. And I think honestly, it is the reason that happens in the movie Lost, or in the TV show Lost, and why you have the whole like
Mhm.
there's a back half of the plane plot, is
Yep.
because it happened in real life in this situation. And it is quite disturbing to see. But another thing that I highly, 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 highly recommend, if you watch this film, to watch the documentary on Netflix afterwards, because you see their commitment to doing practical effects
Yeah.
Mhm.
throughout, and it matters. It matters.
Absolutely.
You feel the weight, the impact, the reality of all of it, and including the crash, like you said, these close-ups of snapping bones and
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's just
Pretty
intense.
much every single thing that happens in this movie is convincing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I just watched this show. I didn't even talk about this in what we've been watching, but I watched Masters of the Air on Apple TV Plus,
Mhm.
and at no point do I believe that those people are in the air doing,
Anything.
bombings for World War II. Like there's no,
Yeah.
it looks like, honestly, it looks like it's from a video game. Like the CG,
Mhm.
and I don't blame the talented artists. I'm sure like they didn't have enough time to do what they wanted to do or whatever, but like it does not look convincing at all. At no point during Society of the Snow was I not convinced, or rather, at
Right.
every point I was convinced that
Mhm.
what we are seeing was something that these characters were going through. And that's like extremely high order of difficulty to achieve in a movie like this.
Yes.
So there was that. There was the plane crash. By 40 minutes into this 2 hour long, 2.5 hour long movie, they're already getting to the part where they eat people. And by the way,
Yep.
technically, I think the term is anthropophagy, which
Sure.
is the eating of human flesh. Cannibalism implies you're killing people and eating them. But
Okay.
anyway,
Okay.
45 minutes in, they're eating people, and I'm like, there's still a whole movie left.
The whole movie,
movie runtime left of stuff to happen, and I didn't know what it would be. And
I mean, they get rescued. I looked at the clocks. There's half an hour left in this movie. What is?
Well, that's one of the big
Right.
differences between it and Alive, right? Is Alive ends with we crest the mountain and we see green, and then helicopters arrive.
Right.
And I love that this movie is like, no, what actually happened
Yeah.
is they had to climb down that mountain, and a dude had to see them.
Right.
The dude
and
had to
like,
throw a rock to them.
This
for
is a real
note.
thing that happened.
He
They
threw a
like,
loaf of bread actually in real life.
Man.
But yeah, it's why. And then he rode for like 4 hours to go get help.
Wild.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
Which they don't
that
show in the
dude.
movie.
Best
But-
dude in a movie in a long
Yeah.
time. You see that dude, you're like, that dude is salvation. I love that dude. Great.
Yeah. But yeah, so then what happens in the rest of the movie is you see all the ordeals they have to go through. And there is this huge snowstorm, and it's so brilliantly done. Everyone's like finally bonding as a community. They're hanging out. Everything's going great. And then this avalanche engulfs the thing. The entire thing is shot ultra wide angle close up. So you're like in people's faces as they're like digging each other out. It's an incredible sequence. And you just realize how, again, as with the crash, like how tenuous the line is between life and death, where, they were able to dig this person out 10 seconds earlier than the last person. That person lived and the other person died.
I feel like the most brazen screenwriter would never dare to come up with, you've already put your characters in an impossible situation.
Right. Yeah.
To then avalanche them out of their,
it's
like the idea that the wildest mind of fiction, the most masochistic fiction writer wouldn't do that to their characters, and yet it happened in real life like that. Yeah. And they still survived.
Yes.
It's just mind-boggling.
I agree with you. Like, if you're a screenwriter, they would say, like, okay, I think we've put the characters through enough
Tone
already.
It down, pal.
But only because it's like a true story could you do this and really get away with it.
Only God could get away with this.
Right, exactly.
I guess. Or nature. I do like that they're always questioning, like, why? Why are we, like, what is the meaning of this? And I do think, like, even though it's a little patent, it's a little obvious, like, what they get to, man, we kind of need that right now. That sort of idea, like, we are all we have right now. And it's really up to us to do something about so many things that's going wrong and killing us all.
But there's just so many memorable sequences of the movie. When they first climb the mountain and they stay up there overnight, like, like, just that alone would be put aside the plane crash and the storm. It's just like, imagine just climbing a mountain and just staying there overnight.
Just finding the tarp. Finding the tarp was like
them laying on snow during the day. I'm already out. Like, that's snow.
You live
lounging on snow.
Yeah.
But they get to and there's this incredible sequence where they wake up the next day and you see them like emerge from the snow like a chrysalis.
We're alive. Hey.
Amazing, right?
One of the worst parts to me was the first time they climb up the mountain and they turn around and they go, you can't see it.
You can't see anything. Yeah.
You can't see it just from this far away.
Right.
We're never going to get saved.
Yeah.
That part just is utterly heartbreaking.
Man.
Like the number of times their hope is crushed, it's just like that one time when the plane flies by and they're like, okay, all we got to do is sit here and wait. And it's going to be awesome. And then they realize, and then they're hearing it on the radio when they're like, we've given up searching. And it's like, oh my God.
I thought the radio was like, oh, that's like a fake thing they made up for the movie. But apparently they actually had a radio. Like that was actually a real touch. But then we get to like the ending, right? And the whole final 45 minutes was incredible because these guys, they decide, hey, we're going to die here if we don't try to do this. And so, as you said, they climb to the top of this mountain and then there's this incredible shot where it pulls back and the shot just goes on forever. It just, you see how high up they are, how tall they are, how far these mountains go for. And then there's like a couple shots of them just sitting there, like looking at it. And I was
what
just like,
do we do now?
That's an amazing shot. Because if that was me, I would just sit there and just kind of contemplate how screwed I am in this situation, right? It's amazing. And then the conversation they have where they say like, the mountains can't go on forever. Like they have to end at some point. And
logically, yes,
it's like I'm either gonna make it to salvation or I'm gonna die. Like, but they make that decision, and that's a very like powerful moment. That was a very powerful moment. In a movie filled with them. And then, as you said, they get to the bottom, and then one of the coolest parts is when they see like a lizard. And it's like that's the first life they have seen in months.
You got like they're like, I'm gonna eat that lizard.
Yeah. So the entire go ahead.
Stylistically, that I think we should bring up, which is very divergent from how Alive did it, and how I think anybody might first think to do it, is that the sort of narrator that we get in this story does not survive. It is revealed the narrator is talking to us from beyond life. And I just thought that was a really interesting way to sort of keep the audience on their toes too. And you even going, I know that the story is how these people got rescued. None of our characters are safe because even our narrator dies, and it turns out to be the last person who dies. But I just thought that was kind of a beautiful and interesting approach.
Yeah. And also telling the story from that perspective is interesting too, because again, it reinforces this idea of there's really no real reason why like some people survived and some died, right? It was all just like very random. And only through coming together can they even have a chance of fighting their way out of this situation. But it's really remarkable. The whole final 30 minutes, I was a complete mess. I was crying because I'm just gonna put this out there, guys. Okay, for us here on the podcast, we've all gone through stuff. Okay, in recent years,
sure,
we've all had trying times.
It really puts it all in perspective.
We really all had trying times, and A, it really puts it all in perspective. But B, these people got out of that situation. Like they eventually got to the other side of that situation, and in the most literally the most challenging conditions you could possibly imagine on planet Earth. And there's something about their joy in like reuniting with all their loved ones at the end, and like and just making it out of this horrible situation that, like, honestly, it gave me hope. It gave me, like, these people could survive that thing. Like, who are we to say we cannot survive anything that we are going through right now?
It is very much one of those things, like parents making their kids watch this movie. Listen, they didn't complain.
You think it's bad?
You think it's bad?
You don't want to finish your broccoli? I also had the thought, if you've watched the documentary, they interview some of the survivors who are still alive. One of whom became a pediatric doctor.
Yeah.
And I often wonder if, like, do you know what Dr. So-and-so did, when he was young? Your doctor, he's like, take a deep breath. I ate people.
It is fascinating that the entire end sequence never even really touched on it, right? They talk about like people having all these questions, but I'd imagine there is a whole level of press being like, how did they survive? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
These people came back and ate people? Like, we found a pile of bones over there.
Yeah.
What's going on with that?
Jeff, you are, not to date you, but you're one of the older people on the podcast.
On the planet. Yeah.
Like, I was not, like, do you remember?
I was also not alive in 1972, Dave.
Yeah, that's a while.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, do you remember? I guess, like, I'm so curious what the conversation was.
I'm sure the local conversation.
Many people
the
objected,
media landscape.
Right?
Can you imagine it happening now? It would have been. I mean, all these people would have been on reality shows for the rest of their lives too.
Right.
But the first time I had ever heard of this was in 1993 when the movie came out. I was not aware of it growing. I mean, it's not something that came up in conversation as a kid in the early 80s. So
but my sense is there's been a shift, right, from wow, what these people did was horrible to
Well-
well, I guess you needed to do that to survive. You know?
Yeah.
I'm sure you and our listeners have all heard the common joke that has entered into our culture of, well, who are we going to eat first? You know, that like that's kind of
Mhm.
become a, you know, a trope of, oh my gosh, you know, Black Friday, we're all stuck here, you know, who are we going to eat for? That came from that. It came
Mhm.
from that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we're stuck in the thing. You do the joke of like, oh, well, you know, I'm going to eat whatever. Eating people to survive became a sort of cultural reality because these dudes did it. And, you know,
They proved it could be done.
So it's ingrained in our sort of psyche, global
I mean,
psyche.
Yellow Jackets is a show entirely kind of based on this premise too, right? So
Yeah. I mean, I guess the Donner Party did it before this, but you know,
I kind of want to
whatever.
rewatch Ravenous now. Like that was a good movie back in the day. Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway,
I don't think the Donner Party turned out well, though, if I recall.
Could have been better.
I think that's right. I think you're right about that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would have loved to see kind of what the conversation was, because by the in terms of Alive and also this movie, like when you get to the end, it's all presented as like this triumph of they made it, and like all the like negativity around eating people is gone away. But none of us were alive at the time, and so none
I
of
think
us were
that's a
exposed.
legitimate potential criticism of the movie is that it really does hand wave away, you know, and I'm not criticizing the movie for that, because I think it has other things it's more interested in doing, but there is certainly a way of looking at this story that takes that. I mean, the movie, as uncomfortable as it was for me to watch this movie, and like I said, I had to stop and watch it in 2 sittings just because of how harrowing and upsetting it was. But it really does let the viewer off the hook with that stuff. It does not make you think about it too much. It becomes commonplace and normal in the context of the movie very fast, and never does it linger visually. We don't have a shot of a corpse. You know, there's one shot of a rib cage.
We
but
get
it's
the bones.
It's very tame with regard to that. It doesn't make the viewer really reckon with that on a certain level. And
I think that's true of Alive as well, right? Like, if I recall correctly,
Alive is even worse. It looks like chicken. I mean, it's literally like they just like a piece of chicken and they eat it. At least here it looks kind of disturbing and whatever. But even more than that, there's no reckoning with the notion of, you know, the families of the people who were eaten, right? And how they felt about that, and what you know, because these are complicated emotions, you know, and I can understand that there would have been a lot of tumult around that, you know, potentially. So, but the movie just doesn't have that in its purview at all.
Yeah. I will say what I appreciated was that they framed it as something that became normalized over time. Like initially when, you know, some people are like, I object, I shall not eat anyone, you know, and then by the end, people are like, they don't even care anymore.
I mean, not even by the end, by midway. I mean, 72 days is just impossible for that not to be. And and even the movie explicitly says, like, at a certain point, we don't even think about it anymore. This is just what we eat.
And I think there's something about how, like, the drive to survive is so powerful there that like it can normalize anything, you know. I thought that was an interesting touch. So anyway, a lot to talk about, a lot to dive into, but it's a movie that I think is really impressive.
There's that scene, you know, after they get saved where they're eating in their little cabin, and I just felt like no food has ever looked more delicious in a movie ever.
Seriously.
And
even to the viewer, right? Like you're
totally. Yeah. And B, I couldn't help thinking, like, you know, your friends are still there, and you're just, I mean, I certainly
gotta get energy to go back. You know?
I would be eating too, being just like, oh man, it's gotta be rough to just know your friends are still in it, you know.
They would want you to feast.
I mean, at that point, they had been hiking by themselves for 10 days, right?
Yes.
So what I feel like the movie underplays that accomplishment. Like,
Mhm.
Oh, totally. Totally.
a 10-day hike into nothing, right?
Yeah.
With almost no supplies.
Well, the idea that we go from, oh, should we eat humans to like, I don't know if we have enough human to make it this whole way. You know, we're gonna need more human
Yeah.
to eat. It's just so disturbing. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah. I did think it was a nice touch when he like buried his friend's flesh at the end, though. It was kind of
Mhm.
like this, like, it's
Yeah.
an acknowledgement that, like, hey, like, people gave of their bodies to so
Mhm.
that other people could survive, and I
Yeah.
appreciated that. So anyway,
Yep.
brilliant film.
Yeah, I'm
Brilliant
glad
film.
Bayona did not get stuck making another Jurassic World movie. You know, like he made that. That was pretty successful actually, and now you get to make this. So I'm
This
happy for that.
is his best film by far in my. It is
Mhm.
so daring. It is so technically accomplished.
Yeah, it's hard to overstate how incredible the filmmaking is.
Yeah,
it,
it's
it truly
ridiculously good.
is stunning, beautiful. I mean, the acting, the performances he gets out of these
Yeah.
people with cameras like right in their
Yeah.
faces, so their faces fill the frame, and we're right there feeling everything they feel. It's really a triumph in that regard, for
Mhm.
sure.
So
Absolutely.
watch all his movies, people. Like I talk to people like, you haven't seen The Orphanage? I guess it hasn't
Love The
had like that
Orphanage.
lasting value for people, like at least on the horror side. Orphanage, very good. The Mission, very
Incredible.
good. Have not seen When a Monster Calls. Should check that out. Yeah,
I think
Well-
The Orphanage is one of the greatest horror movies ever
it's
made.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, it is really impressive that J.A. Bayona made a movie. And this movie in particular is pretty amazing. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.